Growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s, conservatives were using religion as a form of power and control. I mean, this is nothing new. They have been doing this for many centuries. And participating in any sort of alternative subculture, having to interact people who are very religious was a special kind of hell. Growing up in a Christian household was very confusing for me. In case you don't know, I am an American, but I have Central American descent. And countries in Central America are very influenced by Christianity. The reason why it was so confusing for me, one side of the family was Catholic and the other side was evangelical Christian. I remember attending Sunday Mass, a Catholic church. You saw candle lit everywhere. You saw priests. I mean, you see a typical Catholic setting. On the other hand, you see evangelical Christians worshiping God either at somebody's house or at some random plaza. I remember when I started developing consciousness, 5 to 6 years old, I do remember going to church. I remember looking at Mary, and it was on a glass-stained window. And I just kept thinking to myself, okay, this doesn't make sense. If God is real, then why isn't there a goddess that is alongside with God? How is it that there's millions of people in this world and this almighty source of entity can see and witness what we're doing, and if we carry a lot of sins to us, we will go to hell? Why is God so jealous if I want to worship somebody else? And these are very introspective questions I would ask myself as a kid. I guess it was my natural curiosity that wonder and ask questions. And when I attended a Sunday Mass or at an evangelical church, I would see people speaking in tongues, talk about everyone with judgment, and it's not, God doesn't approve of you listening to music and dancing. LGBTQ community, you're a product of a sin, and God doesn't approve of you. When I observed this behavior going on while being in an evangelical setting, I noticed a very I'm better than thou. It was a very cult-like mentality. And being alternative too, they see you and they want to repent you, or they think you're some sort of creature that doesn't belong in this earth. It didn't matter if you were a goth, a punk, emo, metal, it did not matter to them. You were an abomination of God. And I believe, like, even at such a young age, I didn't even resonate with Christianity. However, which I'll get more into that in this video, I actually was really naturally into tarot cards or crystal balls, and also nature. During my teen years, my family became less and less prone to going to church. However, sometimes my mother would go attend the church that she would go to. If I wanted to spend time with her or do something fun to get out of the house, I would go to church with her, even though I didn't want it to. And it would also give me an opportunity to see my cousins, because around that time I was really close with my cousins. However, as time went by and I was figuring myself out, observing it from a first person and a third person's perspective, interacting with these people, I knew right then and there I didn't want nothing to do with Christianity. Many of my family members disapproved of my lifestyle. Thankfully, I had my dad who was more open-minded to it. He thought it was more of a phase, and then eventually I would get over it. And if I brought him good grades, that, he didn't mind whatsoever. And he already introduced me to rock and roll, so I was already more heavily prone into listening to rock and roll music. My mother, on the other hand, she disapproved of my lifestyle so much. I also know this had to do a lot with religion and the people she was surrounding herself with. She disapproved of it so much that there was a moment of time that I guess her family members and the people that she would attend church with convinced her to do a form of prayer for me. Either a prayer or a form of exorcising me, because apparently I had a demon stuck within me, and just because I was listening to goth music. And I would start dressing up in family parties, and oftentimes I would hear some of my family members and my mom not to dress up the way I dress up, because they were embarrassed of me, especially when we would go to these family parties that were so close to the church. So one day I went to visit my aunt's house, and somehow they were acting really weird with me. And there was a person who was able to contact God. Like, that isn't a form of witchcraft, but okay. And that God wanted to have a word with me. I was like, okay, sure, just to get these people off my back. The person started speaking to me in Spanish, and asked me, why do I like this lifestyle? What is it about this lifestyle that I am attracted to? Then I responded with anxiety, thinking I was in trouble, and I just said, I really like the music and I love to dress like this. And she's like, God is talking to me right now. And you know what he said? He doesn't like that you dress like this, that all in black. Listening to music and dressing like this, it's all part of the world. You shouldn't listen to this, because if you continue to listen to this, you're gonna go to hell. And you also have a demon that is in you, and I need to take it out of your system or your body, whatever. But I responded by saying, well, this isn't bad. They don't talk the songs I listen to don't really talk about religion or God in a bad way. And then she's like, no, we still have to do this. I need to bless you. Okay. So then I was like, I didn't know what to do. I was just quiet, and I think I froze. I often go on flight mode, even like when I was younger. So, and I guess I just felt like, well, if this would make my mom happy, then I'll just do it. So she grabs my wrist. She grabs both of them, puts my arm up, and had my arms lifted for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then I closed my eyes, and then she started repenting and going like this, take this demon away from her. Oh, like, and Dios, please, God, please take this demon away from her. And it was to the point where she grabbed my wrist really hard, both of them. My arms were feeling numb. I was feeling so awkward. I ended up opening my eyes a little bit and started seeing her facial expressions, and I couldn't help but to laugh, smirk, and started like smiling, because I wanted to laugh so bad from what I was witnessing. And my arms were hurting. I was feeling so uncomfortable. After that day, I stopped going to church with my mom. There was no way in hell I was going to go to that church. Fuck that. I didn't even go to that house as much anymore, because I just thought it was completely like unfair. And every time I would visit these people, they always gave me a death stare. It's like they always tried to convince my mom for me not to dress like this. So I stopped going to church activities for a while. I stopped going to these family parties, and I said to myself, I'm not gonna tolerate this abuse. I'd rather just stay home on the weekends or go to my grandma's house from my dad's side. And because I feel safe, hell no, I'm not gonna fucking take this shit. And I stopped going for a while. Another incident that occurred of me dealing with religious trauma. So there was this family member who is a second uncle of mine, and it was one of my cousins' 15th birthday. And but we call it La Quinceañera. If you don't know what a quinceañera is, it's family members who throw a big party because apparently you're becoming a young woman at 15 years old. So I went, and again I was dressing up a little bit more, and I remember I had a bob cut, my hair was still brown, and I had a trip corset top, and then a choker that I semi-made, and then a coffin purse. So then this family member, I've never seen him in my life. This was the first time me meeting this person, and as soon as he saw me, he was so dramatic, and he was like, and he embarrassed me in front of everybody, and he was like, oh my god, you're like telling me that I was ugly, and that what am I don't remember what he was saying, but he was being very vulgar in his language. I straight out told him, you know what? Who the hell do you think you are? I don't know you. And I was about to tell him, fuck you. But I got stopped because I was like a little teenager. So, you know, it is what it is. And throughout that whole quinceañera, I felt so embarrassed of even being there. I wanted to go home. And this person apologized to me, but I'll be honest, even if he apologized to me, I can't help it. There's certain people that I hold grudges, and that was my first impression of this person, and that he was judgmental, and he was very narrow-minded, and after that I was like, well, fuck you. I am not gonna fucking interact with you. I am not gonna talk to you ever again because you're a piece of shit. Like, I was a fucking kid, and you're out here trying to fucking embarrass a child. Fuck you. So then the third time, this is the third and final time that I had a religious experience, really traumatic experience in Christianity, and that's when I'm like, I'm done. So a couple years later, it's 2009. I am 17 years old, and as I got deeper into my lifestyle, and I was also discovering Wicca and really embellishing myself into finding my spiritual path, but also I wanted to go out more. I like to go out a lot. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I love to travel, and I wanted my freedom so bad. So I made this deal with my mom. I told my mom, I will go to church with you if you let me go be with my boyfriend. I will go to church with you in exchange of me going out more, extending my curfew. So she and I agreed. The moment that I stepped foot in this church, again, I kind of had to tone down. I thought I was dressing normal that day, but now in hindsight, I really wasn't. I remember I had some high heels on because I had a pencil skirt, and then I think a corset, along with ripped tights, or like semi-ripped. I don't remember, but it was like somewhere around that. There was a pastor, and this pastor was a special guest. He was going to be he was a special guest at this church. He looked at me, and he said hi to my mom, and he said hi to me, and he asked me, hey, do you want to attend do you want to go alongside with the youth there in the front? And I'm like, no. I was already mad that I went. Like, I was already regretting this deal that I did with my mom because I just did not want to be there. And of course, the other churchgoers were all happy that I was there because I was giving God a chance, but in reality I wasn't. I was just there because I made a deal with my mother, and I was obliging to this deal. So then I said no, I don't want to go. No. And this man got so pissed off, and apparently he named all the youth, again, like the kids, the teenagers that were attending church that day, and they went in the front. They went in the front of the podium, and as soon as he started speaking, speech went from talking about something about the Bible, and then to me that I was a fucking demon, and next thing you know, this man is speaking in fucking tongues. His eyes looked crazy. I wanted to punch this motherfucker in the face. I didn't know how to respond. I froze. That was one of the most, I felt like I was in a movie, in a scene where the nerd or gets humiliated by everyone in high school. Just mad, and I wanted to say something so bad, but nobody was letting me. However, I guess somebody complained to him, and that person supposedly never attended that church ever again. Yeah, that was like, you know what, I'm fucking done with this shit. I never want to interact with people who are evangelical Christians. How I perceive them is they're ignorant, they're narrow-minded people. As a teenager and a young adult, I knew I had a strong sense of hatred against Christianity. And it's not only just because of my personal experience, but also the colonization of Native people here in the Americas. And also what happens under the supervision of priests. However, Catholics though, my experience with Catholicism and Catholics, even though I still don't agree with a lot what the church does, somehow in some way I still felt accepted there. I didn't in Catholicism, and my perception of Catholics and Christians are different. I often find Catholics being very strict with their traditions, honoring God, but I also see there's a lot of sense of mysticism within the rituals of Catholicism, and I do appreciate that a lot. And even though with Catholicism I still felt accepted, so I didn't have a hatred against Catholicism. If anything, I do appreciate it a lot from a artistic sense, and they didn't give me that culty mentality that I get from Christians. Having this religious trauma, it made me develop a sense of like wanting to be more open-minded. I accept people for who they are. I try not to be a judgmental person. However, I do have Christian friends and I've had Christian friends in the past, but somehow I still felt limited. And I am at this point in my life where I don't want to limit myself for anybody. If my presence is going to make you feel uncomfortable, then I don't want your presence. And if you don't respect me, then why am I going to respect you? It's better that you're not in my life. And that's how I see Catholicism. I do appreciate it in an artistic sense, from the home decor, from wearing rosaries, from even listening to music such as Gregorian chants. One of the language of music and music theory was through church. And so yes, I am a big Enigma fan, I can't help it. The Renaissance era with paintings of Madonna and Child, cathedrals, and I just find it really beautiful. And growing up in LA too, and being around Chicanos and Mexicans and Mexican Americans, I found it very intriguing because it was something that I grew up in, and I perceived it as mystical and magical too. From the glass-stained windows, from them worshiping saints, angels, and different versions of Mother Mary, that made a little bit more sense to me. So as an artistic and spiritual perspective, I get it. And it's also just engraved in our culture, including people who practice Santeria, brujeria, voodoo or hoodoo. I believe, don't quote me on the hoodoo and voodoo part, but for the most part, we use a lot of saints to worship, even now, like Santa Muerte. And when my grandmother passed away, my grandmother was the first person I lost in my life, like, who died. And she was a mother figure to me. She was she loved me like nobody like else. And she was very devoted Catholic. And she always loved me and accepted me for who I was. If you see me wearing rosaries or you see paintings, I'm honoring her memory and keeping her memory alive. The effects of growing up in a religious household was very difficult in growing up, especially being Latina. Christianity had to be respected. The way how religious trauma affected me was, I don't know if it was more in a positive way or negative or neutral. I start seeing somebody becoming way too cult-like in their views and perspectives. I'm like, hell no. I have so much self-awareness that I think there was a certain point I started like getting very much, because I've always been into astrology, but I really got deep into it a couple years ago. I still am, but I just started saying, oh, I don't like you because you're a Scorpio. And it's just like, okay, I'm doing exactly what the people I hated did to me in the past. So, I start judging people by their sign, and when I saw that in me, I immediately stopped. So I don't like to do that anymore. I am a person that values my freedom. I value freedom so much. And I think the reason why is because when you grow up in a Latino household, you grow up in a very strict, your parents are usually very strict. And the trauma that I endured was probably like, I became open-minded with people. I don't like to judge people by their book. I don't like to judge a book by its cover. And I just have a lot of sense of empathy and understanding for others, because why would you want to be like somebody else? Like the same people? Why would you want to be a copy of another person? Why don't you just embrace your most authentic self instead of just being like what you want to be, and instead of just following path that limits you? That didn't sit well with me. Religion is just a form of control, and I don't know how I felt about that. And then for so many generations, you've heard that the apocalypse is coming, the ending is here, and you gotta repent your sins. And I'm like, no, like, I'm gonna live my life present. I'm not gonna have fear control me. And everyone wants to implement fear from you, from the media, from religion, from everywhere. And it's just like, one of the things I do appreciate in especially the younger generation, is you guys don't have to go through massive witch hunts, religious zealots, narrow-minded people. Yes, you do. I'm not gonna say you don't come across with that. You do. It gives you more freedom to enjoy the subculture freely. The world is changing a lot, and even though there's some things I don't agree with, like certain aspects of the goth subculture, especially the more consumerist aspect of it, hell, like people see you and it's much more accepting. There are problems within the subculture, like new problems we are facing. At least much more people are willing to accept you for who you are, and actually appreciate the style, or appreciate the way you look, or your music taste. And we took a beating for the world so you guys can walk peacefully. And I'm just glad that religion is not so important now as it used to be, because it was rough. It definitely was rough seeing protesters saying things like God hates, people trying to brainwash you into their beliefs, seeing you as a target, just because you're different, or being pronounced a killer because an incel decided to hurt people and they wore black that day, whenever what they did. Or even going for prison for a crime you didn't commit. Let's not forget the blood that this religion has for many years, or even being a victim of satanic panic, or if you're dealing with religious trauma and trying to overcome it, just know this: fear is the greatest tool for control. Don't fall for that trap.